Hey everybody, welcome to part 2 of the Christmas bonus episode. If you haven't already checked out part 1, I would suggest checking that out first, as it really frames our discussion here in part 2. However, if you don't have time, no worries. In this episode, we talk a lot about why Christians who share the same fundamental beliefs can disagree so strongly on a wide variety of issues, and why that's actually a good thing. We also get into freedom of speech, and then we have a decent argument about whether the American dream, and by extension, the Canadian dream, are essentially Christian ideas or not. Hopefully you find this episode to be enjoyable and at least mildly informative. Please let us know what your thoughts are on all this. As mentioned previously, if you're interested in advertising on Real Talk, please send us an email. It is linked down below. All right, folks, without further ado, please enjoy part 2 of the Christmas bonus episode.
So, well, you said liberal versus conservative, so that triggered me.
I did not say versus. I said liberal and conservative.
No, I would say versus.
That's not bad versus good or good versus bad.
No, I never said
different.
One is bad and one is good. I was just saying. That is one thing I wanted to bring up, because I think that's been one thing that when I talk to people about the things that I've listened to or watched, that's everyone's eyes kind of like glaze over for a bit, and then they're like, "Oh, hey, that's totally how it is."
Totally. Tim, you want to crack a window so we don't absolutely fry here, and then Tyler can explain. This
is getting off of a race and all that, but I thought,
well, no, go ahead.
No,
go ahead. I was thinking, like, if we're getting away from,
we'll get back to it.
Okay,
there's no getting away from it. Yeah. This is taking a break from our white fragility for a minute. So. A lot of this stems. We haven't even said Jordan Peterson's name yet, man. A lot of this stems from his research, but I guess just psychology in general.
Well, and Jonathan Haidt as well. That's a really good book I read called "Why Good People Are Divided by Religion and Politics," and that was pretty informative and impactful in the way I think about issues. Yeah.
So, anyways, you help me out here. So, basically, you have I see conservatives versus liberals, but. What makes up a conservative person or a liberal person, in essence, is personality, and that's what they. That's
a
what
lot
they
of it. Yes,
a lot of what they. So
it's a large factor.
And that's not how it's usually framed. It's usually framed as politics. It's usually framed as you like this and you like that. Yeah. And I think that's unhelpful, especially in our churches. So we talk of conservative churches and liberal churches in our denomination, which I think it's not inaccurate. Necessarily,
but it gets blackened by the political terms,
right? Exactly. So in essence, maybe I'll try to describe what conservative people and liberal people are, but correct me if I'm a little bit wrong.
Like I do have. Well, go ahead with your. I have the character traits that.
Well, you got the 5. Okay, you go. You have 5 character traits and explain why one is conservative.
Is this your thing right here?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So
maybe I'll pull your thing up too.
Within psychology, there's generally 5. Now, not everyone. 5. The big 5. Yeah. Not everyone agrees with this division of character traits, but most people do. So the big 5, you can remember them by the acronym OCEAN. So O is openness, C is conscientiousness, E is extroversion, A is agreeableness, and N is neuroticism. So
maybe explain them as you go to, because I never understood a bunch of these.
So openness is essentially. It's been a little while since I've.
It binds openness to experience too.
Right, openness to new ideas, openness
to experience.
Experience. It includes creativity as well. Yep. Generally, creative people are very high in openness. And then the opposite of openness is sort of like you can define it as conservative, right? Yep. They want to hold on to routine, what exists exactly. Yeah. So that's openness.
So high openness, liberal. So generally, creatively. Open to experience. I think I'm just trying to think. Entrepreneurs would fit into there really, really well.
Yeah, often.
So that would be the liberal end of that specific trait spectrum.
Right.
So it'd be like you are, if you're high, most entrepreneurs are high in openness because they're willing to go out of their way to experience different things, and try even if they fail.
New. Yep.
So that's the liberal end, and the conservative end is like, well, I'm just okay with going to work, coming home 9 to 5, whatever. So that's kind of how those things are
more
framed.
like rather than framing conservative like that, I'd frame conservative as seeking stability. right?
Yeah.
Stability, security.
Stability and security, they prioritize that.
Right.
And yeah, I was
All
just
right,
gonna
keep
say
going.
this will be a theme as we go throughout, but
Yeah.
it's not a poll, like either ends of it are not good, bad. Like
No,
need
that's
both.
right.
They need each other.
You
And this
need
is the
each
whole
other,
point,
and this
right?
is the whole point. But we'll go through.
Yeah.
Let Mike.
Yeah. So then on to conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, it's just kind of your level of almost self-motivation. Like you're motivated to get jobs done versus the opposite of that, where you procrastinate and you delay doing things, stuff
I think
like
like
that.
attention to detail would fall in there probably.
Yeah, likely if you're high in conscientiousness, you also pay attention to detail quite closely. So again, if you're high in conscientiousness, you're more likely conservative. If you're low in conscientiousness, then you're more likely on the liberal side.
Yeah. I always go back to business because that's where I live. But so in this trait, conscientious people are high conscientious people are often managers and are very good at menial tasks. So repetition, not missing things.
Right.
So
not just menial, but also they're good at
menial.
systems.
Yes.
So
Making things
in
work.
place
Yeah.
systems,
Yeah.
like the typical way this is described is like you need the open, creative liberal to take the risk and start the business and come up with the idea,
Mhm.
but you need the conservative person to come in
To run
and
it.
to
manage it.
manage the system and
Yeah,
kind of
so
help create it, perhaps.
So with conscientiousness, like high conscientiousness is conservative concentration on something like that.
Low volatility is also a factor.
Yeah.
Did you take the
That-
Peterson course,
that's
by the
not-
way?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
That's
I did.
That's
I had, like,
neuroticism. So
tons of notes right
Okay.
here. So
Oh.
if you get stuck, I got you.
Yeah. Now, I didn't find a whole lot on the other three character traits. Do you have that?
I do, yeah. So
Go ahead.
extroversion, which is all these are kind of divided into two little parts.
Mhm.
So extroversion is compassion and politeness. Those are the two sub traits under extroversion. So compassion is usually more of a liberal value, although it breaks down after the first two.
That's right. So
after
the
first two are the key ones.
you really have that distinction.
yeah, but you're also like you can be high in one thing, low in another thing, middle of the road.
Right.
You're all over the place, and even you're saying they're breaking these things down. This comes from the Peterson, Understand Yourself website
yeah,
model
like
of how he lays it out.
yeah.
So he actually subcategorizes like you're high in this section of agreeableness and low in this one.
Yeah, so like the breakdown on this one is like liberals tend to be a little more compassionate on average.
Mhm.
On
Yeah.
average, I mean, again, like you say, people kind of slot themselves in a bit of different spots.
Yeah.
But politeness tends to go to the conservatives on this one.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that breaks down.
Yep.
The next one is agreeableness, and that's subdivided into enthusiasm and assertiveness. So those are two big traits.
Yeah.
right
So
there.
this one I always view in business as Peterson often talks about it.
So these are both more
agree-
liberal things.
Yes. So enthusiasm and assertiveness.
Yes, because the next
is
one,
is assertiveness more liberal?
yeah, typically.
I wouldn't know. Anyways, he always talks about men and women because this is where men and
Right.
women differ quite a bit.
Yeah.
Women tend to be a lot more agreeable than men, which
Men tend to be more assertive.
that makes up for the wage gap. So men seem to be more assertive in the way that they deal with their lives. More in general, very, very general statement. The distributions overlap, obviously, but that's what he always says.
There's more similarity between men and women than there is difference.
Yes, of course. But the distribution, so
Psychologically
there's a lot
speaking.
more.
Yeah.
There's more men who are less agreeable than there are women, and so that kind of ties back into like the crime rate. It comes back into like, and then
Suicide.
in business, it's like I make more because I ask for more, right? And so that's you're less agreeable. You like to basically just put up an argument with everything.
Yeah.
So that's typically more of a male trait than a female trait. So I think that's how that one's framed. I don't know exactly how male or conservative liberals land on that.
Again, the binary kind of breaks down these last
A little
three,
bit, yeah.
but it's mainly those main two of
Yeah.
openness and conscientiousness. The final one's neuroticism, just if anyone's interested. And then you get the subcategories of industriousness and orderliness.
Yeah. So
Which tend to
that's
be-
like
that's why I say those
volatility, right?
No, volatility is under under conscientiousness.
So
Really, is it?
but the point behind all of this is that character traits are generally what is referred to as immutable. So they don't change. You can't change your
Very
character.
little. It's very tricky.
Very little. You can
Yeah.
kind of change how your character expresses itself to a certain extent, but your actual character traits are largely unchangeable.
Nearly locked in your DNA, almost, yeah.
To a certain extent, yes.
The funny thing about that is like Peterson, this is the test that you did, right? This is where it came from.
Mm-hmm.
He would say that exactly. And so you can only take his test once online.
Right. Yeah, that's right.
So it's like, make it a good time because you're not going to do it again.
Yeah.
So you'd have to like pretend to be someone else if you want to get a second analysis. But his point was like, you are who you are. So like do this one test well and you'll get a pretty accurate representation of who you are.
Right.
And that is who you are. It's not like, there's not a whole lot of movement there.
Yeah. And the point behind that is if liberals kind of fall into one category of personality traits and conservatives into another, well, your disagreement, generally, like I kind of split the difference between a few of them, but let's say I'm conservative and let's say I'm talking to a liberal and we're in a heated argument, our differences might not be on policy or how we see the world, but the differences might be in our character, and that's not changeable, right?
Yeah. The way I always like to think about it is that, so the world is a very complex place and there are just a multitude of facts out there to consider, and you can't possibly consider all of them at once.
Right.
So how do you take in the facts that the world presents? If you want to look at it like that, well, you take it in through your worldview, and the things that stick out to you first. Worldview is shaped by what you believe, obviously. So within the church, hopefully that's a fundamental basis that we all have, the scriptural teachings of Christ. But then how else do you choose what to pull out of the world first? That kind of form your initial reactions. And then, you take on more things and you get more nuance in your opinions. Well, it's your psychology, it's your character, it's your personality. Your character trait that so if you're an openness, like high in openness liberal, you're going to see certain facts and certain traits are going to stick out to you first. Like sooner. So if you're kind of the entrepreneurial type and you survey the landscape, you're going to see all the opportunity. You're like, oh wow, there's so many opportunities for business here. This is fantastic. But if you're more of a conservative, very not much of a risk taker, and you're like, I gotta stay home, bend the fort. Like you like take the stock market for example. That's a good one where you get more conservative people like don't like the risk. I'll just mutual funds for me or something. Whatever it is, or even something safer like real estate or something.
And that's not disparaging conservatives at all, because conservatives make very good like managers and stuff like that.
The liberals win more maybe, but they also lose more. So
So I always think the liberal
win bigger, I should say. Sorry.
What's that?
I was going to say win bigger is what I meant to say. The liberals will win bigger, like to take bigger swings at
right. Yes. Okay. So this ties right back into it.
So lose more.
So the entrepreneurial thing, I think, is like a pretty good way to look at it. So if you think liberal characteristics often determine who, if you are more entrepreneurial. So technically
openness.
Yeah. Well, no,
which is associated with political liberals.
Yeah.
No, but I would say personality traits dictates whether you're on something like this would dictate like you're a liberal, more liberal person than a conservative, if I can phrase it like that. Is that fair?
If you're higher in openness.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. So if you're higher in openness, I think you're considered a liberal in this liberal
Not category. For sure, but that's the generalization.
Sure. Yeah, okay. Okay, so maybe that's not the best way to phrase it, but I would say, so by the technical definition, I'm an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But I would say, compared to many, many people that I know, I am in no way creative. So I'm actually not that high, I don't think, in openness. So I'm an entrepreneur who found something to do and did it, which is a very conservative mindset. It's like, I'm a good manager. Go. Oh, here's something to do. That can make some money. Go do that. Oh, he would be like, wow, you started a business. Well, that's not necessarily entrepreneurial. So entrepreneurial to me is like the creative aspect of it. So if you're an artist, you take tons of risk because there are very few artists who make it big, right? So this is very typical of an entrepreneur, of a creative field. So like musicians, musicians, painters, like authors, all these things, right?
Anybody, podcasters, whatever.
These people have to.
Crazy people.
Yeah. These people, I say these people, if you're really creative and you want to make it in one of those fields, you have to go where the opportunity presents itself, which is the city.
Right.
And so if you look at our churches, you think, okay, well, the more liberal churches, open to experience churches who are open to different ways of thinking about church are in the city. And the further you get away from a city, this is why I think just those openness, the liberal people who are open to experience move to the city, because that's where the opportunity presents itself.
Or they stay in the city.
Yeah, or they stay in the city.
Yeah.
And so you see, this is why I think it's important to frame this, is that you see that in the city, there's a group of people who have to be in the city to do what their personality dictates they should do. Is like, and those people are so valuable that we don't realize as, and I live in the city, but I'm not one of those people. Those creative people are so valuable to all of our churches in the city and out of the city, and we don't value them enough and don't talk about like we don't talk like this enough. So the example I would give would be like, if you have a committee that's job is in your church to come up with ideas on how to better do mission.
Yeah. Evangelism.
The best person to do that is a person who's open, who is higher in openness, who is a liberal person.
But
like, well,
if you want to get something done.
Right. So yeah, I mean, so this is the kind of disparity. You need both
right,
people.
Absolutely.
And so like, we don't say that enough. It's like, you can't just have a whole group of conservative people. And that doesn't mean like, if you're part of a conservative type church, you need to find those liberal people in your church, despite of how far along the spectrum of liberal they are. Those are the people who are going to make your ideas or come up with ideas.
Yeah.
And then as conservative people, you have to recognize that and say, okay, now how can I take your idea and then turn it into something?
Yeah.
Because that's what you're good at. Because you're a conservative, you're a good manager, basically.
So the reason that's important is because we have the commission from Christ to go out into the world and spread the gospel, right? And it takes the creative people, the artists, to create a vision to do that, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, so yes, we absolutely need both conservatives and liberals to move forward with something. The one distinction I want to make in this discussion, though, is that we're talking about conservatives and liberals in the sort of classical sense as opposed to the modern political sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
I hope we framed that good enough.
So people on the left who call themselves liberals, leftists, generally are not high in openness at all. There's a lot of people on the left who are very, very set in their ways. There's people on the right who are set in their ways, but we're talking about the classical liberal ideals, the interest in ideas, interest in freedom, stuff like that, versus the classical conservative ideals, which is interest in tradition and maintenance of
maintaining society.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's just so important for, I guess there's two encouragements. It's like, if you're a liberal person, the tendency will be, because the opportunity presents itself in a more liberal area, not like just geographically. Like if you look at downtown Toronto, there's a ton of opportunity for liberal people to come up. Like, this is why Silicon Valley exists. This is just a group of liberal people coming up with amazing ideas that change the world. As a conservative person, you're like, let me go down there and make money. You're like, let me grab on one of these ideas and then just like bring it to the market.
Yeah.
Right. But these liberal people gather, or open people gather, so that they can create ideas together. And so I would encourage people who are artists to try to stay in, an environment that it might not necessarily help them thrive in that. And it's a hard thing to say, but I would also encourage people who are conservative who would say, you have to retain those people. And the way to do that isn't to be like, well, they're all leaving. It's like, why would they go to the city? Like, what's in the city, right? It's to say, hey, how can we make a place for them? It doesn't have to be a job, but it can be like a role in your church that's like, now they can come up with ideas. Now they can create value the way that they know how, right? Yeah. And so if you recognize those opportunities in your church, to be really intentional about like connecting with those people and being like, hey, you fit so well into this and we need to keep you here.
And a large part of that is just being able to have a discussion and seeing it. I know we use these terms, liberal, conservative, and it's not really in the political realm so much as it's just their stand-ins for the psychological terms of openness and conscientiousness. But if you approach this from a perspective of, okay, Fundamentally, we share the same beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
We share this. We go to the same church. We have the same creed, same confessions. So there's a chance right there for this beautiful fusion to happen, because in Christ, in the Bible, we have that underlying basis. We have the fundamentals down pat.
Mm-hmm.
So then when you get people who just approach, you were to take a problem or an issue, you're going to approach it from two different sides. That's actually a good thing.
Yeah,
it's in that fusion. It's in that, which only happens through open and honest conversation.
Yeah, and we can't shut those down, which is what I think our culture is saying in general. Like, stop listening to people, just do your thing, and
we have that tendency.
It's a natural
sinful. That's right. So conservatives are likely to group together because they're not challenged and they enjoy stability.
Yep.
Liberals are likely to group together because they're sick of stability and they want to do something new.
Yeah, right.
Totally.
Right. But then without, like, if a whole bunch of liberals go out and do something, and you see this in, like, I've seen this in certain missions, very open, very, very excited people get out, set up a mission, but they haven't included someone in their team who is sort of on the conservative managerial side of things.
The follow-through person. Yeah.
Exactly. And the creators, the starters, they started that mission, but they can't actually follow through to run it.
It's just like
the mission fails.
It's like a mission of ideas.
Right.
Yeah. But this is like, there's conventions. Like, I think about Silicon Valley all the time, but there's conventions in the States where, like, in Vegas, every year my brother went to this. There's a convention there where everyone just brings their best optics and their best, it's all camera stuff, all that stuff. And so you go there and you just look at ideas.
Yeah.
And they rank these ideas, and actually, well, this is a whole other thing, but he came up with one of the best ideas one year. The best ideas that are at that show don't ever turn into anything. And you're like, how, if one of those things, you just pick one of them and you're like, this could change the world. This could change the way, like, many different industries run. And they just don't do anything. It's like, it's just they didn't have the conservative mind there, the managerial side, to be like, just grab that idea and be like, this is how we're going to do it.
Or perhaps they didn't manage to convince a conservative who wants to stay in his box that this idea is worth managing.
Right, but that's what that whole investing in. The whole show is like,
right.
The whole show is like, here's all the ideas we have. Come invest in us. But it's like, that's not really a good way to frame things. It should be like, hey, you're a conservative person. We need a conservative person because, we're all liberal people. We just come up with ideas. We don't really know what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And if people would be able to admit that, there'd be way better ideas like that actually come to market.
That's right. So, absolutely. And it's the same thing in our churches, right?
Steve Jobs tells the same story about Apple and stuff. He's just an ideas guy, but he would surround himself with people who could actually make it happen, and then he would dictate his ideas to them, and they'd be like, okay, and he would make sure they share the vision.
Sounds good, Steve. We'll get it done. Take over the world.
Right. And so people always make fun of him, even though he's dead.
Yeah.
He was like, yeah, well, look, what did that guy actually do, right? And he if you look at what he did every day, it was like a joke. He just walked around and thought about stuff, right? But he changed the world. I got a Mac right here, but I mean, whatever. But Apple's it's huge, and it's a company
that's
like
company in the world.
Exactly. Yeah. And he wouldn't be able to do that without.
Well, in your example of committees, like in church life, and committees, consistories, whatever, I think that's really where the rubber meets the road on these things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's if you get a good, healthy mix of people who share the same fundamentals, but come at it from different perspectives, and if you have that open and honest dialogue, I know I keep hammering this point home, but it's so crucial.
So
that's how change happens.
So
good change.
Then diversity is a strength.
Diversity of ideas.
But you have to share a guiding principle.
Yeah.
Right. If you remove that guiding principle and your guiding principle is diversity, then it creates division.
Yeah, diversity within unity, perhaps.
Yeah. So
it's almost a bit of an oxymoron, but it kind of works.
University. That was the original intent behind universities, to find unity in diversity.
Get out. Actually?
Yes.
Oh, dang. Etymology Mike over here.
Really?
That's an idea I got from Rabbi Zacharias. So,
that's cool.
Pretty sure. That was, so basically universities brought together all the studies to basically unify them.
Yeah.
To find a unifying principle.
And
it was like universities were not originally to prepare people for a high-paying job. Universities were to discuss ideas.
I knew that.
It was research.
Ideas that weren't very relevant in actual life, but that has completely changed.
Yeah.
And so,
well, money helps,
Yeah.
True.
But yeah, I think, you got to have the fundamentals, which is like, obviously if you're listening to this, we're Christians, and
if you made it this far,
hopefully you agree with us. Exactly. But then you need real talk, right?
Yeah.
After that, it's like, now you actually have to sit down and actually want to learn what that other person knows, and then, want to help them or allow them to help you. And I think that could change.
Totally.
Change
So,
does that make sense?
I was going to throw it to Tim. Are we in the weeds?
I do.
Can you
I have
hack us
a
out
few
of one?
cents to throw into this that I've been wanting to say for like 5 minutes, but so from what I can gather from a lot of you guys, there's a problem with people playing the victim to their differences, right? Even within our churches, people are playing the victim and saying, I've got this opinion, you've got yours, and you're attacking me for this and this reason, right? But if you ever read the book Respectable Sins by Jerry Bridges, really, really good. Any listeners, I advise you read it. It's amazing. But there's a lot of our differences that we have within our churches. If you want to say a liberal church and conservative church, again, very careful with how we say that.
We're very careful with everything we say.
Yeah.
We just say it and we say we're careful. So.
Cover
say
it
sorry
over.
later.
But with that, we have to make sure that we're discussing if there's an issue, if it's a doctrinal issue, or if it's a personal preference.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of time,
Absolutely.
I find within our society, we're selfish by human nature. We're very selfish, and when someone has a different opinion, you take it as a personal attack and you play the victim, right? And there is no room for that. And that is a huge divide in our churches right now, especially, is that we find these differences, and it makes us uncomfortable. But why? Right? Are we stuck in our conservative way? Are we stuck in our liberal way?
Yeah, I think it overlaps a little, right? Like, so especially you see that in mission, because the church, I believe, is called to be missional, right? We're called to go out, and so that is like a biblical truth. So now you argue about how that has to happen. Well, so a liberal person has ideas about how that has to happen, and a conservative person says, well, we're probably good enough. Let's just keep doing what we're doing. People will come, right? So now, what you're saying is like, now if you want to do that, then I say no, and you say yes, and back and forth we go.
Yeah.
And then we take this personally.
Right.
So you're arguing around a truth with the room for personal difference.
And then
which is where it really gets tough.
Exactly. And then you come back and someone can come away with that saying like, oh, they don't want to do missional work because of this and this and this.
Right.
Like, no, that's not it. They just don't want to do the same way you want to do it.
Right. But they're also sinful too. So maybe
Exactly.
they do just want to shut you down.
Maybe.
So that's the thing. It's like, you have to be gracious. And it's the same thing with soul singing. Right? It's like, I want to sing this. You want to sing that. I mean, we agree it has to be biblical. So it's like, here's your truth. And now there's room for opinion. But yeah.
Everyone needs to take a slice of humble pie.
Yeah.
Big time. So, but getting into that, it's like in that context, we're seeing a little bit of the ideologies in the world also inside the church. So what happens is ideas become more important than your base of identity. Base of identity is we're made in the image of God. But then all of a sudden we're allowing ideas to define someone, and we're allowing ideas to become an identity. And then when someone disagrees with you, then their identity in your perspective is that they disagree with you. So again, it's an identity issue, right?
Right. You put people in boxes, right?
You put people in boxes.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that tendency. So it's not just in culture, it's in the church too. And we've got to be very careful with that. We've got to be very careful to always maintain the proper base of identity rather than elevating someone's ideas above that.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, part of just maintaining that is just a basic level of respect.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And the only basis for respect for someone is that they're made in the image of God.
Right.
There's no other absolute basis.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, we're at the 2 hour mark here, I think. Or almost, anyways.
Sending it. Hey, we're going.
So, what,
We're
2
getting-
hours to go?
We're getting very close to like talking about arguments and division between people over ideas. We're getting very close to a discussion on freedom of speech. So
let's just roll right into that, because I think that's exactly what I wanted to cover with liberal and conservative ideas and personalities. And every time I had mentioned this to somebody, this came probably almost straight out of Jordan Peterson with my lens of Christianity on it, and applying it to the church. And every time I've mentioned that, everyone just says, wow, yeah, that's what it is. And
Wow, so profound. Wow.
I say wow too much on this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Mike,
Long-time listeners of, the past 6 months.
Freedom
will
of speech?
Definitely
Freedom
know.
of speech.
Yeah. You smell that? You used to smell it in the air?
Huh?
Yeah, it's Mike. He wants to talk about freedom of speech. Let's go.
I just said we're getting close to it, and that's like we could talk a long time on this.
This guy's drinking out of his jumbo jug over here.
Yeah.
How many liters is that thing?
1 gallon.
Oh, yeah. Tim and his gallon jug. All right. What do you want to say about freedom of speech? This whole thing is about freedom
I've
of speech.
seen that jug. Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Are you behind? You keeping up?
Get drinking,
Oh,
Tim.
I see. That's like your daily dose of water?
Yeah, it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So by like, what is it, 7?
Just 9 at the bottom.
A little bit more. Well done. Wow, dude.
It's a good idea. I'll say that.
I have not stayed on top of it.
Who's got room to carry around a jug like that?
Guys like Tim.
It's like, that reminds me of the
only a
Samaritan woman
select amount of men.
drawing water out of the well.
Basically. Anyways, all right. So you say freedom of speech. Are you concerned about freedom of speech? What in our country as a whole, in the West as a whole,
Compelled
more
speech.
locally in the church level?
Well, we were just talking about how it's very easy to get into disagreements with someone, perhaps just based off of personality.
Yep.
And then it's really easy to make that step being like, I don't like what you say. I want to shut you down.
Yep.
So a lot of people might not really know this, but in Canada, we don't have freedom of speech. We have it in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but it does not exist for Canadians right now.
Mm-hmm.
For example, you are not allowed to speak out in public against trans people. In fact, we have, it goes one step further. We have compelled speech. So you have to use someone's gender pronouns as they identify.
And that's those on Twitter now or on Instagram, putting their pronouns. Kamala Harris did it.
Right.
Oh, in their bio. Yeah.
Vice president is like, I'm a she or her. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
So breaking news.
By Canadian law, like we have to use those pronouns. So it's not just that we don't have freedom of speech. We are actually compelled to speak a certain way. Mm-hmm. And that is, we're seeing it more and more. There was another instance that reminded me of this. I can't remember now, but it's something current that reinforces that our freedom of speech, well, we don't have it anymore. And the government is continuously restricting our freedom of speech. It was actually around censorship on social media.
Well, anything COVID related, right?
Anything COVID related, that's right.
You can't, like YouTube, not all social media.
Right. But so there's now
government and private. But go ahead. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Right now there's a discussion in politics about what to do with social media.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's two disagreements on the right. The right is basically trying to push social media to stop censoring people, while the left is trying to increase censorship. And right now, the Trudeau Liberals are seeking to push social media outlets, platforms, to increase censorship. So again, they're trying to use government power through social media to decrease our freedom of speech. And it is an issue. We've just discussed how liberals and conservatives need each other, and we need to discuss, and that's being slowly, systematically taken away.
Yeah, it's the only way to find anything out, right? For freedom of speech.
Absolutely.
You gotta put the bad out with the good, and let the good ideas win fundamentally.
Yeah. Okay, so terrible question: is there room for hate speech law?
Well, it depends on what you define hate speech as.
Mm-hmm. So I'm just thinking, for instance, you mentioned social media, but so social media, there has been clear evidence that on social media, people have been recruited for ISIS. They've been, they've been taught things,
or for Antifa or anything too.
Right. And who's the guy who rented a van and ran some people over in downtown Toronto?
Right.
Was part of a group that hated women. It was like, women don't like us.
Incels.
It's probably women's problem. Which is like, obviously.
I never get laid. It's women's fault.
All women's, if all women reject you, it's not the women. That's what Peterson always says.
Fair point.
So there's obviously clear evidence on social media, which is a dangerous thing to begin with, that there's evidence for radicalization of people causing harm.
Right.
So how does a government react to that? in a way that's still upholding freedom of speech.
Right. So,
I mean, just solve it for us. Like, come on.
yeah, no problem. No problem. Just listen to my podcast.
Yeah, Professor, hold on.
That's one Christian thinks.
So I would argue that there are restrictions to speech. Actually, I would say there's restrictions to speech that are set up to keep it free. I just did a podcast on how on to have freedom, you have to have guidelines.
Oh yeah.
So that's a bit of a different topic, but freedom isn't being able to do whatever you want. So it's the same thing with speech. Free speech isn't the ability to do whatever you want. So for example, speech that the classic restriction or the classic guideline to free speech, it's a better way of putting it, is that you're not allowed speaking in such a way that causes or you're not allowed like a call to action for violence.
Yes.
Right. So if you post on social media, hey, let's go firebomb this guy's house.
Yep.
That's illegal.
You'll be arrested.
You'll be arrested.
Yeah.
Even within free speech legislation, you'll be arrested.
Yeah.
Right. Now where the justification for Trudeau banning or Trudeau trying to force people to use gender pronouns, justification for that is he's claiming that language is violence.
It's harm.
So if you call someone by the wrong pronouns, then you're being violent towards them. So that's his justification.
That whole violence thing is a very problematic term too.
Oh, it absolutely is.
Right, because you almost said speech that causes harm, which is like,
right.
Yeah, now define harm.
Right.
So it's like, okay, well, you defined it well because it's like a call to action to go beat someone up.
Physical violence.
Right. Physical violence. Right. Whereas now they're like saying, well, violence could be you attacking my psyche by not calling me by my pronoun. And that really hurts me, and whether or not that's true is saying something to someone constituting violence.
So
it's not the same as shooting them.
No, it's not at all.
But if you phrase it like they're both violence, now you can do anything. You can compel speech. You can shut down freedom of speech.
Right,
and that's obviously impacts Christians like in a big way.
Absolutely, there is a small amount of truth to it because we all know that words can cause harm. Right,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
There's a small amount of truth to it. But if all of a sudden you are cutting away speech that might be deemed offensive, well, then you've just seriously restricted your ability to discover the truth because
in order to think you have to risk being offensive.
Right.
Where did that come from?
And for all us Christians, well, the gospel's pretty offensive to people who don't want to hear it.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And if you confess the gospel is the truth, then by condemning offensive speech, then you've stopped people from finding the gospel.
Well, so it's funny you say that. So on the way here, I was listening to Relatable from Allie Stuckey. Yeah. She was talking about gender and this whole, the obvious push of, transgenderism. And like recently there was a celebrity, we were talking about this just before we went on air, Ellen Page, who's now Elliot Page and is identifying as a male.
Right.
And Stuckey was making the point that basically as Christians, if you don't feel that you're able to stand up for what is one of the most fundamental biological realities that we know to be true and say, look, like a woman is not a man or a man is not a woman. Like this, it just is what it is. This is how God created it. Mm-hmm. How much more could you stand up for the gospel?
Right.
If hate speech stuff comes in on that too,
because
you're not allowed to say that about people who are trans. You can't say, look, like that, like I support you, like in terms of like I respect you as a person and I don't want any harm to come to you. And, if you would like to get some counseling, you'd like to talk about this, if you have a relationship with that person, like there's all sorts of steps to take and there's no violence in that at all.
Right.
But you can't affirm that they changed sexes.
Yeah.
Or even genders, which is they split those two off, but that's also part of the whole thing.
Yeah, but it comes down to what you just said. Is like you have to if you value them as a person, which is to say, you value the fact that they were they are human and they were created in the image of God.
Yeah.
Now, so you value that. So they're saying by you not using their pronoun, you're no longer valuing them as a human, which obviously is wrong in Christian. So you say, I support you. I believe you have the same rights as everybody, obviously. And also, I would love to help you. And you could show love to them as a Christian.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean you agree with them, and doesn't mean you shouldn't be able to criticize them. So it's
but you have a fundamental basis to turn to, like Mike was saying before. It's like this: God's design for you is as whatever He created you as.
Yeah,
that's what it is. Yeah. And there's a lot of things you can do to help, to work through that, to help accept that, and there's all sorts of therapies and counseling techniques. But fundamentally, that is the truth. So how much more for the gospel, though? Like if you have the whole hate speech thing, to get back to the free speech topic. Yeah. Like that's just so fundamental.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how far down the road are we? I'm always curious. Like,
what do you mean? Like in what context?
Well, it seems like this is all tied into everything that we talk about, right? It was like, if you now believe intersectionality is real, if you think that's like the way to view the world, now you can put everyone in groups. Now you can't offend another group. You can't be offensive. Like that is violence. Now you have no freedom of speech. So I guess everything has.
Tim's got a question. Where do we?
I've got something. Well, we started with Marxism, right? Mm-hmm. So that's where everyone wants the same, but now we're fighting over people want to be called different. And if you don't tell them that you don't say their pronouns right, or accept their gender or anything like that, then you are not being inclusive. Right. Although you're figuring out their difference. You know what I mean? So riddle me that.
I wonder if the bottom of Marxism is one of the tenets actually that everyone wants to be the same. So that's a hard thing to piece through too.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because they're trying to bring everyone to the same level, but right now they're magnifying diversity. Ultimately, they're magnifying diversity because they're trying to establish the oppressed and the oppressor.
Yeah, it's a highlight.
Well, they're trying to bring it back, right?
Yeah.
So they are trying to bring it. It's like this was historically wrong. Let's bring this back by now. The anti-racism, which is a whole other problematic term when you talk about. But anti-racism is like now a black person can be racist toward a white person because racism that's just disparity that they deserve.
Prejudice,
and so to bring it back.
Oh, that's what. Yeah.
And so you hear things, but you hear things that say like, well, my ancestors have done things, and why don't I deserve to be treated differently because of that? Or like why don't I deserve to suffer because my ancestors oppressed black people? Like they kind of do have the ability, the reason to oppress us. It's like, I mean, that's a really dangerous thing to say, but you hear that all the time.
You do, yeah, absolutely.
And so this anti-racist thing is like it's bringing it back level, but I don't know if Marxism in its fundamental premises would say everyone's to be. It's a utopia, right? So
they're pushing for utopia.
Yeah,
like a utopia on this earth as opposed to a heaven. Like that's their,
like everyone's the same, but they all want to be the same too, right? That's kind of half of what it is too.
I don't think Marxism would say that everybody is the same. I mean, the classic, like the clear distinction is between rich and poor.
Right.
But they're trying to bring that back.
No, I think they're just going for outcome, quality of outcome. That's equality of people.
Yeah, and the part of the challenge is how do you define what's equal? Do you define it on income level? Do you define it?
That was it. So like Marxism, like Karl Marx would say economic, right?
Like for real.
Yeah.
Well, Karl Marx would say like economic because he was economic, right? But like now, like critical theory, I think is like taking that to every other aspect of the life, which is like now your sexuality, your race, and everything. So it's like extrapolating that out.
Because you'll hear folks like Jordan Peterson say this a lot. They'll talk about postmodern neo-Marxism.
Ooh.
So neo-Marxism would be this cultural Marxism essentially.
Yeah.
It's Marxism morphing into the culture.
Yeah.
And all these split identity groups. Postmodernism is just the age after modernism.
Yeah.
Which modernism was, like man, like reason and rationality. It was like peak scientific method overtakes religion. That's all old news.
Absolute truth.
But there was an idea of absolute truth, which came through logic and reason.
So science was like
logic, reason,
truth.
and rationality. Now there is no truth in the postmodern age.
Well,
but that doesn't really jive with Marxism or neo-Marxism because neo-Marxism is a worldview.
Right.
And
so
it has its own
this
set
is
of
critical
tenets.
theory would not say, which I was surprised at.
Are we in weeds?
I think
We're well in the weeds here.
Weed whacker Tim just sitting off to the side.
Yeah, that's good.
trying to make sense of all of it. Just following you.
Yeah, so critical theory, I found it was actually surprising. So critical theorists would not say that there's no absolute truth. They would say you as a white person or you as an oppressor do not have access to the real truth because of your blindness to your privilege.
Yeah, I think you're right there.
And so
that's why we're not allowed to talk.
Right. So, but they wouldn't be classical. I guess classical postmodernists that's just an oxymoron. But they wouldn't classically believe postmodernists like there is no absolute truth. They would say there is an absolute truth. You just don't know what it is.
Well, you're exactly right. So I can't remember if I made this point in one of my episodes. Is that the people protesting for Black Lives Matter are not postmodern because they believe in an absolute truth.
For sure.
Absolutely. Or else they wouldn't be out there protesting.
Yeah.
Right. So we're seeing, it's interesting because postmodernism was held up for a long time. Well, not a long time in the grand scheme of things, but it's been fairly prevalent in kind of the 21st century, but we're seeing it fall apart. We're seeing people realize that there is a truth and there has to be a truth.
Well, that's the basis of Western society, so which is Judeo-Christian values.
Is neo-Marxism filling the vacuum left by the church, by Christianity?
I think that's the intention. Is like, if you're going to dispense with what the underpinnings of our society, which is Judeo-Christian values, you have to replace it with something. What do you replace it with? So you need another truth to put in there. Otherwise, I think that's what you're getting at. You can't just replace that with nothingness, which is
it's a comprehensive worldview. So it fits. It fits in that slot of where Christianity previously was.
Sure. Depends on how you view comprehensive worldview.
There's no good ending.
I've been listening to, I've already told you, I've been listening to
Joe?
No, Vanderklay.
No, Paul Vanderklay.
Paul Vanderklay. And he always calls secularism the evil twin sister of Christianity. Because Christianity goes in somewhere and doesn't manage to fill that society with its ideals, and then secularism comes in and wins.
Oh, really?
So it's interesting how he refers to that. There's like a dynamic between Christianity and secularism for societal kind of to gain kind of a critical mass of adherents in a society.
Okay, right.
But if you take it to that step that you took, is Marxism, is neo-Marxism kind of filling a void in where Christianity was? I would say yes, through secularism.
Interesting.
Because neo-Marxism is an absolutely secular movement.
Well, secular is too broad to define it that way because you have secular liberalism.
Well, so
which is a different movement.
Sure.
So an example. So I'm just thinking. I'm always thinking about evolution, because this kind of ties back in everywhere. If you believe that, so I'm just trying to break apart what you said there because I have not heard this before.
I know it's an idea that I just became acquainted with.
Which it kind of makes sense. So if say the modern, like pre-postmodern, so we go back a little while, and it was very focused on, the modern mind was very focused on science.
Yeah.
So you're saying like Christianity was good for everybody, but left a void that everyone kind of felt, void in scare quotes, huge, void that couldn't explain how we came to be, or didn't, satisfy everyone's need to know exactly what happened with how we came to be in this world.
Yeah.
And then you enter modernism or enter secularism, and then they come up with evolution to solve that problem of Christianity.
Right. I know what you're saying. Yeah, to a certain extent.
Is that what you're saying?
I haven't listened to a lot of what he says, but he's referred to secularism as kind of the evil twin sister of Christianity.
Because it kind of makes sense that it's like,
it kind of makes sense, right? Because
the world's trying to,
you have Christianity, and Christianity kind of like taking sort of a Western perspective. Christianity was kind of ended up being pushed out by the Enlightenment, by the rise of science, by everything else. So in a way, Christianity was kind of pushed out by secularism. Christianity failed to sort of maintain a critical mass of adherents in society. They failed to kind of maintain the majority of society, and then secularism stepped in and filled that void.
Right. But so as Christians, we know that's never going to happen. But
that secularism wins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But is that the idea that it's like, so Christianity has its time in the sun, then secularism comes in and tries to solve all the problems that Christianity was solving in the culture? Like, so I'm just thinking like Christianity, like it's very evident in Western culture, obviously, but Christianity is solving, what is right and wrong in terms of like murder.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well,
sure.
Murder is wrong. You can't just go kill somebody. You get put in jail for that. Now, does secularism?
I don't know if it's that simple.
No, but like that's
atheists would definitely just disagree with that. But.
Right, but no,
like a lot of people who aren't Christian be like, yeah, obviously it's wrong to murder.
Right, no, but this is exactly my point. Like secularism, now they've justified murder, so it's like now atheists also can believe that. So this is totally a Sam Harris thing, right? It's like, can you have value without the Bible or without a higher power, right?
Right.
So if they can replace all of the tenets of Christianity that make our society functional, i.e. like murder, like all laws, right? If you can get there in a secular way, like, you can exist on this earth because evolution explained it. If you can create a society where science or your rational mind can explain everything and therefore create your value, then you're golden. You can just dispense with Christianity and then your secularism wins.
Okay, but this comes back to what Mike was talking about before. So I'm just going to test out this theory on you guys, see what you think. But
I like it.
So you have modernism and rational age, enlightenment, right? This is whatever, 1800s or so, 1800s. Then eventually that gets taken over. So that takes over from Christianity previously, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the movement almost into the 19th century. Then you get the rise, the rise of Marx in the 1800s into the 19th, and the rise of communism and all this stuff. It fails in the East, basically. Communism fails.
Yeah.
But the secular liberal, and it seems like the West wins. Secular liberalism in the West wins because we've kind of lost the Christian train of thought there. So capitalism keeps running, keeps chugging. We have great economy in the 90s into the 2000s. That's the whole era of like Clinton and the what was it, the third way, kind of just like opening up China and all this stuff too, right? So the world is expanding, globalism's on the rise, capitalism is just kicking butt, it's doing well.
Yeah.
But we've come unmoored from our Christian moorings. Yeah. Right. So you have this greed that you talked about before.
Yeah.
With the Wolf of Wall Street. So I think what current modern day Marxism, neo-Marxism, is a corrective to is the runaway excesses of capitalism run amok from its moral Christian roots. And so I think it's a third way because secular liberalism has failed. It's failed to provide meaning for people, not economically, but also somewhat economically because it does inequalities on the rise and disenfranchisement. But
there's a lot there.
The first thing I thought was I think you attributed the loss of Christianity in Western culture too early. I think that in general,
the ideas were quote unquote defeated pretty early. It just takes a while for it to go out in society.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
That's there's a lot of points in the last couple of minutes, like Sam Harris and talking about where Christianity failed. So ultimately, secularism tried to give meaning and morality,
and it couldn't do it.
And Sam Harris argues for that, and it couldn't do it, which is why we have the meaning crisis and the rise of Jordan Peterson and sort of the intellectual dark web. But now,
nice, good term, love
it. Now, you're starting to go into, ultimately, you're right. So this is where Marx sort of had his basis. He saw the downfall of kind of capitalism.
We're kind of in the same time period right now in terms of the early industrial revolution. It's like we're in the early technological revolution.
Yeah. And rather than going back to Christianity, Marx went the opposite way.
Yeah.
And that's why Marxism always fails.
So if the church can't speak to the, I would say, the economic problems, which are it's all so complicated and intertwined, but
It is.
you do have to have some sort of something to say in that arena as
Right.
Christians. We do.
Yeah.
Because that's why you see the rise of socialism
Yeah.
among young
Absolutely.
people today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they see like if you're a young person, it's hard to buy a house. It sucks.
Great.
You need a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like
you'll be
if you,
fine.
especially in the States, you gotta go. Spoken like someone who owns 2 houses, anyways. But especially if you're in the States too, like school costs a ton of money. Like it's not a good system the way it's set up.
School's not a good system, but yeah.
School's not a good system. Like
Right
I'm not saying the
now-
whole system is shot, but I'm saying like there are a lot of disadvantages that I think have piled up as a result of secular liberalism just run amok. And capitalism without this kind of moral basis to kind of look after the downtrodden in society.
And rather than turn back to God, because nobody wants to acknowledge God.
No.
If you acknowledge God, then you have to acknowledge that, well, if there's an almighty power, then you better be aware of that, and you better pay attention.
We're going to tear it down and create a utopia.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what we're going to do.
They're moving the opposite direction. They're deliberately moving the opposite direction away from Christianity.
Yeah.
But so kind of working with what you did there with sort of secular liberalism, I've thought a lot about kind of the basis for the West and where it went astray, kind of like what you did there. So kind of how I conceptualize it, now hear me out and you guys can disagree with me if you want, but my thoughts were that the West started with liberalism. So basically pursuit of freedom, pursuit of people being able to kind of form their own ideal, guided by Christianity. So you have this pursuit of freedom guided by Christianity. That was the basis for things like the US Constitution.
Yeah, the American dream is by no means Christian.
Right. But the guiding principles at the base,
I would take issue with that. But
at the start,
I think in essence, no.
had a Christian guiding principle. And then what happened was people turned away from Christianity, and rather than liberalism being guided by Christianity, liberalism became liberalism was guided by humanism instead.
Yeah.
And like, I think it works very well with your analysis. Secularism, humanism, like they're almost interchangeable in some ways.
Well, because it made that switch, which to your point about the American dream, I think does fit with the Christian understanding.
Depends on how you
So I'm going to talk about freedom.
Define American dream,
because you need.
Yeah.
I think the American dream. The American dream is to live free, and free is to live in freedom, and freedom is defined as freedom how you ought to act. Freedom to act. Sorry, I should say that better. Freedom to act as you ought, and the ought comes from the Bible,
right? Which is framed by your last podcast episode 9. People,
yeah, that's right.
Freedom is framed by how God made the earth, with the 10 Commandments.
And the problem is, into it. If you don't have a moral populace, especially like the majority, which is kind of key for keeping things on track, then you get the runaway of secular liberalism.
Right. And then someone like Sam Harris comes in and writes a book on how secularism can identify or can create a morality and can create meaning. And if you read his book, it's terrible. It contradicts itself multiple times.
He is very smart, though.
He is quite smart, and so
intelligent, not wise in any way.
So like I read the book and it wasn't hard to tear apart. And so if anyone wants to look into it, William Lane Craig, all you have to do is search up William Lane Craig's analysis of Sam Harris's book. It's phenomenal. Tears it right apart. But reading Sam Harris's book, it's almost self-evident that the book tears itself apart. And that's where kind of the meaning crisis comes from, that secular liberalism or secularism in general just does not give meaning. And that's why our system is falling apart.
Yep.
And now.
Yeah. No, that's really good. So it kind of seems like it's right now, like young people, if I'm just thinking of someone who's like an unchurched young person today, who's like looking at, their options growing up, like it's not all bad. I'm not saying it's like terrible, but like, it's probably economically more challenging than it was for your parents.
Perhaps, yeah. Okay.
I think that's probably fair to say. I mean, you can make the case about it being softer and all that kind of stuff.
I think we also have different standards of living, different standards of what we want. But
it's really hard to say because you also have a different starting point. Your parents are loaded compared to what they were before, right?
Yeah,
I think in
maybe. Like compared to like my parents.
Yeah, I would think, right? Especially immigrants.
So one
Comparatively.
of the challenges is that we see where our parents are, and generally we come from fairly well-to-do families, or at least established families.
Yeah, solidly middle class.
That have
typically.
disposable income. So we see that, and then starting out, we want that as well.
Yeah.
Whereas like I know my parents like scraped to get by in the beginning, right?
Oh yeah.
And we're not really used to
that. And now
that.
you'd be like happy to rent portion of their home. Right? Like that's what I get. We're like in a podcast studio in my dad's house that is bigger than some people's like apartments. So
this place is a bloody mansion. It's huge.
Right. But I think, I mean, obviously there's just like a striving for that.
Oh, and he worked hard for it. I don't hold that against him at all. I used to actually, fun little story for the listeners. I used to live here when I was 1.
Yeah. This was
my parents rented this area.
Did we tell that story?
I don't think we have, no. Yeah.
Before I take issue with you taking issue about my American dream. This was like Lucas's living room.
Yeah. I'd run around here as like a little kid. Yeah.
No kidding.
Yeah. Then my dad became Mister. And then
he rented it. When his dad was in seminary, he rented.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was an apartment here, like part of the garage. So
yeah, pretty cool.
Anyways, well, I meant by
Sidebar.
American dream. Yeah. You say American dream's like freedom. I would say it's the pursuit of happiness, which is like not a really Christian idea. It's like your pursuit of happiness is like your happiness is
freedom to pursue happiness.
Your joy is in Christ. It's not in your pursuit of earthly things.
I would say the American dream is this close.
Oh, I see like a dagger in his eye, man. He's like, listen here.
So you say the pursuit of happiness is not a Christian thing?
What?
I would say that people do not pursue happiness to the extent that it becomes Christian. Because I would say
full happiness is only achieved
and
as a Christian.
Say it again.
This is a John Piper thing. So he talks a lot about Christian hedonism. And if you take those two words at face value, it seems to be
a conflict.
A conflict, right?
Yeah.
Because you have Christianity and then you have hedonism, which is the pursuit of pleasure.
Yep.
Right. But then he says the reason people are not Christian is because they're not hedonistic enough. Because Christianity gives you that joy. Christianity gives you the fulfillment of joy and happiness and pleasure, such that you don't need to seek it in the world anymore.
Right. But I think that, I would totally agree. But the thing is that American dream isn't framed.
No, it's not framed in that context.
Right. Exactly. So
it's not understood like that today. That's what you're saying, I think.
I think it's never been framed like that.
I think the founders understood that.
No, I don't think so. I think it's framed in this world. And so like
perhaps
you have a pursuit of, you have a right to pursue happiness and joy in your life. And that was like, it's not about like when America was founded, and I would think Western society in general, is not about like you pursuing the most godly way you can and success. It's like you go pursue what you want to pursue, and you should have the right to do that and the ability to do that equal to everyone else.
Right. And I think
that's pretty humanist. It's pretty like,
but given that freedom, I do actually think that freedom is important because
I think it's important
because of those freedoms.
I don't know that you could be, you could have a Christian culture without that idea, but that idea itself alone brings you to a whole different place.
It totally depends on how you define happiness. Where you find happiness.
Well, yeah, no, exactly. But
it's the best system.
But our inclination as sinful humans is not to be, finding happiness in Christ.
Right.
So if you're saying like, I'm going to build my culture on, the pursuit of happiness, that doesn't mean to me, you're now biblical.
Yeah, but you need like.
But I would say you can't have a Christian society really without that.
Well, you need the freedom, like the people. You can't have a theocracy. Like the people have to have the freedom to live as they please, and hopefully, you have a majority of the population that is Christian that will keep the society stable and choose to live in pursuit of happiness as God defines happiness.
You're just saying like, here's your principle of the American dream. Now, hopefully, they're good.
And that's what happened.
Hopefully, they do.
That's what happened in the early days.
That is actually.
I never said it was bad. I just said that the actual statement of the American dream is not
anti-American podcast.
It's not what makes it Christian, right? It's because they were founded also on the Christian principles. That the way they phrased that, it wasn't like everyone should be Christian.
Well, it's in the foundation. Like they say, one nation under God.
Oh, I would 100% agree.
Right.
But I would say that's not, that's being dispensed with. And the American dream is not.
Yeah, correct. No, it's more. I know.
Right.
So,
But then that's my whole point. It's like it doesn't work within a moral populace.
right. And that is,
but you're not going to get a moral populace.
that was,
You had a moral populace.
that was well recognized.
Yes, they had slavery, and they had to
Okay.
fix that.
Maybe
That was
twice,
well
right?
recognized at the founding of the states.
Yes.
That the U.S.
This is my
Constitution would not work for a populace that did not have a moral standard.
And that's why it's a republic and not a democracy. Oh.
Yeah. Like,
Somewhat.
that's part of it.
Somewhat.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I would agree. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put that to rest.
We all agree.
So,
Look
so
at that.
just a point there, like the sort of Western ideal does not work in an immoral public, which is also why we are moving away from the Western ideal of freedom, because society has become immoral. They don't have an absolute standard of morality,
So freedom
and
is.
then freedom
Who's
has
ever
to
in
be
charge?
freedom. Exactly, freedom has to be restricted because otherwise you'd have anarchy.
Well, so the interesting thing, I thought about this when we were talking about Christianity and secularism kind of jockeying in this, in different cultures and stuff. The one thing, like, this is super encouraging, is the one thing that is consistent is Christianity. And it's right in the Bible. It's like, this is never going to be gone. And, you know, as much as, go ahead, there you go. As much as people don't want, like, our human nature is to not want Christianity in our society, and obviously every society is kind of like done away with it, and then but it always comes back somewhere. So,
Yeah.
and I think Western culture has been like, I don't know, maybe I can make the argument that it's been the most deliberate attempt to create a society based on Christianity. But I mean, other than maybe
That's
Israel,
That's fair.
you know, maybe like Old Testament Israel was like, I mean,
Well,
not
there was,
Christianity, not Christianity, I
Who
guess.
was it? Constantine, rather. There was a Roman emperor who was Christian and tried to spread
Well,
Christianity all
there
over.
were emperors,
Rome.
or there were kings and queens
Yeah,
who
that's right.
who dictated you had
But
to
the
be Christian,
underlying
right?
fundamentals, yeah,
Right, I would say as a culture,
in Western society,
right?
yes.
So
Yeah, correct.
Now that's like that is a very
it's a general statement, anyway.
it's a general statement, but it's somewhat controversial and it can be debated. But
That's that's fine. But there's
Yeah.
you know, maybe it's amongst the best.
Yeah.
But you know, if this gets torn down, there will be Christianity somewhere.
right,
You know,
absolutely.
even if
Yeah.
it's not within a state.
Yeah.
You know, which I find is just interesting. You see these examples of, it doesn't matter if it's Western or Eastern culture. You know, the ideas of Christianity are done away with in different ways, but then it comes back.
Yeah,
Well,
always.
even
Yeah,
this
always.
like "Live Not by Lies" book I was reading from Rod Dreher. It's all about like he sees the rise of totalitarianism and communism in the West, and he interviews all these people who grew up in communist Europe and communist
Yeah.
Russia, and talks about their stories and how they resisted giving in to all the communists. And it, in large part, was a lot of Christians who resisted. And you know, you create these smaller, tight-knit communities. Family is very important. Like the nuclear family plays a huge role. And also just knowing your scripture, knowing your Bible. Like that's how a lot of these guys got through torture.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, absolutely.
Just terrible situations.
Yeah.
But you just think of all the oppression, all the millions of lives taken in the name of these dogmas of communism, and the church still survived.
Yeah,
The church still exists in Russia
Yeah.
and in Eastern Europe.
and the church is growing exponentially
I'm sure it's
in China.
flourishing. Yeah, in China, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
it's almost the more you want to quash it, the more
Maybe we want to end this thing on a kind of hopeful note. I know we've been going
Well,
for
what do we got?
a decent amount of time.
20 minutes, 25 minutes left.
How long do you want to go?
I don't know. That's the 3-hour mark. I'm just
So like
As long as we're useful, that's all I'm saying.
like if we're trying to wrap this up, like I do have a couple points that I did sort of want to leave to the end.
Okay.
Just this doesn't have to be the ending point. Certainly not. We can discuss.
we're
this.
really hoping to have you on. I know we chatted about it a little bit, but like if we can do this, like
Every couple months.
we'll do this like a bonus
That'd be
episode
awesome.
every 3 months or something.
Because it gives me a different perspective too. Because otherwise, like you said, one Christian thinks is a monologue, and I'm the only one doing it.
Yeah.
So
Well, this is great.
it gets pretty boring in my
but
head.
We're also not I don't know that anyone would else be able to listen to this and make a rational argument against critical race theory, which we've been trying to do. But like,
It's a bit scatterbrained.
right.
It
But
is
I
a
mean,
little
like
bit
maybe we could do a few of these where we're like more focused on like one
Because
issue
yeah.
and really tackle that. We tackled a couple, but
So
yeah.
like this is a point that can kind of tie all this together. we talked a lot about Marxism, and Marxism is like a general framework for a lot of the movements we see in society today. Identity politics, intersectionality, whether you see that in gender theory or in Black Lives Matter or in whatever other critical theory that you want, it all ties back to Marxism, and it all ties back to its roots of oppressor versus oppressed, right? We have that. And one thing that I realize is we can trace that idea of the oppressor versus the oppressed. We can trace that idea all the way back to the fall into sin. So Adam and Eve were 100% responsible for their fall into sin. But what did they do? They claimed that someone else had put them in that situation. So they were being oppressed by someone else. They were misled by someone else, right? So Adam blamed Eve, right? And that's like a classic way of putting making someone else responsible for your situation. It's the same thing as claiming that you are oppressed by someone, right? Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the serpent. So they had that response right away to blame someone else, make someone else responsible for their situation. But then like the hope of Christianity is that God didn't leave us there. God gave us a way out, right? God provided a savior as a way to level everything out. And then truly with that savior, we can say, I can't name the text, but there's no Jew or Greek. There's no
slaver-free,
male or female, right? And then it's through Christianity that we're all put on an equal playing field in Christ, which is where it's important. So that's kind of my way of putting all this into a biblical perspective in a kind of a comprehensive way.
Christianity truly is the only unifying message.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah,
I like your analysis of the beginning, because it's.
Everyone
should go listen to your 9th episode too. I loved it. It was like the way you frame the way God created this world and built into it the truths of you cover the 10 commandments, but the truths of what is in Scripture are built into the world.
Yeah, built into the foundation.
You can
of creation.
see it in like the first 3 chapters of the Bible.
Yeah, right.
And then you can also see at the fall, the fundamentals of everything that's happening now.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
This is what they did. And it's like, that's no different than now.
Yeah. So I forget who said it, but I was listening to a podcast or something. It was a podcast, and one commentator was on, and he said, you know what, if we want to know more about how to operate in the world as Christians, we've got to go back and study Genesis 1-3. And that will give us context for operating in the world. And like, there's so much truth to that.
This is Loop's evolution back in it. I just cannot in my mind. I mean, that's a whole different thing, but
separate episode.
I cannot fathom being able to have a comprehensive or coherent understanding of the Bible and Christian truth with evolution in there. You just can't do it.
Well, we do have a 4th mic now, so we could get a good debate going if we got 2 sides.
Ken Ham and no, he comes at it from a certain angle, so it's interesting. Anyways, what were you gonna say?
I mean, most people come at stuff from a certain angle.
So
no, yes, it's insightful.
So you're gonna say like what your screen has, just like a blank screen.
Yeah, no,
eyes are glazed over now. You're like,
I don't know. I had not planned on saying.
That's a really good way, I think, to frame that. It's like, the Christian truth is it's in the Bible. It's the only coherent framework to understand the Bible. These
conflicts, like we often think of cultural conflicts as somewhat separated from religion, but these conflicts are not new, and they're like, there's a spiritual root. They go all the way back to the fall into sin. Right?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So maybe one thing, because I think this is kind of practical. This could probably ties back into everything, and we could probably go back in a big loop. But in the last couple of weeks, I've been thinking a bit about the disparity or the difference in the way you think. So we've just been talking about ideologies a lot, right? Which is like what you just said. So it's like Christianity is the only coherent framework to view the world in. So we need to tackle, which is what we're doing on this podcast, is tackling, or just this episode is tackling ideologies that don't agree with the Bible.
Yeah.
And we're doing this at like a very like deep level, epistemological level, right?
Sure.
I want to use that word correctly. Yes.
Sure. I'll give it to you.
Right. But so it's like an epistemological arguments, right? That we're making against different ideologies. You always say ideologies.
I say things weird.
That was very Trump motion.
Get off your golden toilet. Continue.
But, so we're arguing like all we're doing is sitting and talking about this stuff. But at a very practical level, people, especially with racism, there's very practical things that are happening in the world that are like, this is affecting people's lives. So, who was saying? Oh, John Piper was saying, critical race theory and critical theory in general. It's not helpful to say, stop just talking about it and point to blood in the streets and say, look, like people are dying, people are getting hurt over this stuff. Do something practical. That's like a doctor who's saving people's lives, going to a politician and saying, hey, COVID's a big problem. I'm trying to save people's lives over here. Get some gloves on. What are you doing making policies to try to save people?
Yeah.
That's not helping. I'm trying to help this guy. He's dying.
Yeah.
So there's really two ways to frame it. And it almost seems, it can be viewed as not compassionate to be sitting here just talking about this stuff. But I think it's really important. So
absolutely.
I just there's some kind of rift there and some kind of tension, but I think it's important to balance those two things.
Yeah. So maybe on the practical side of things, like just for people, if you can pull a couple takeaways away from this giant rambling conversation on any number of issues.
Hopefully it's been enjoyable at least.
I hope people, it should spark conversations.
I enjoy it.
Mostly questions. Probably.
I learned at least 3 things that were ways of looking at the world I've never thought of before.
I think it's probably more enjoyable for us than anyone else.
It's a bit of a, self-indulgence here.
Yeah.
But I was just going to say, like, on your point, like we keep coming back to Christianity is the only ultimate worldview that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. It's fundamentally true.
Yeah.
So you just have to recognize that when we're dealing with all these other different ideologies, all these other different ways of thinking, they make different truth claims and they pull their knowledge, which is this epistemology you keep referring to. I want to take your reference properly. That's they're pulling knowledge from different sources. So like, critical race theories, like lived experience and like secular humanism and liberalism. It's like, it's only the stuff we can measure and see. It's only rationality. Whereas Christianity, I think, properly bridges that divide between like spiritual knowledge and eternally true knowledge, which God has revealed to us in his word, revealed knowledge, knowledge we have from creation, which we use, the scientific method, which is a good God-given thing that we can use our rational human minds. Like God gives us logic and rationality. These aren't tools of a white patriarchy or anything. Like, they've been around forever. And that's how we discover the world.
God created order, right?
God created order.
And if God created order, then we can expect science to work. Scientific inquiry, we can expect it to work.
That's the only there's the only way it would work.
That's the only reason. If evolution, the Big Bang is real, then scientific inquiry
should just be a random,
just falls away.
Yeah, it shouldn't make that much sense.
Yeah.
Like things would just evolve, separately.
Yeah.
I mean, there'd be obviously a lot of intermingling, but like, yeah. Anyways, we're getting into evolution. That's a whole other
Save
discussion.
that for another discussion.
Yeah. So hopefully this is like, I just think that it's I'm hopeful that this discussion and like us talking about just broad level ideologies can help people frame the way they view practical problems and practical things in their life. So, and then maybe if we keep doing this 3 Christians Think episodes or whatever, what do we call it? Culture Corner?
Yeah, thoughts of the 3 amigos or something. I don't know, I just came up with
if
that
we
now.
keep doing this, maybe we can help people, frame some of the problems that they come across in life, whether it be like in their job, like dealing with racism or
practical issues or big force to go under critical race theory training at work or something like that too.
There's only so many examples that I can come across until it's not helpful anymore. But cool.
Well, we could wrap this up. Producer Tim, any last words? Nah.
Oh, I don't have anything else to say. It's been a great discussion. I've had a great time here, and like truly, like I hope that it's been helpful. And I hope to do it again and carry on the discussion.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if we covered everything that was in our outline and all our notes that we wrote down, but
plenty more.
We went all over the place.
But no, I think it was reasonably comprehensive. So hopefully people can follow along. And I think,
it'll lead to more study and more interest in different topics, perhaps. But
Yeah.
I would just say too, like, this was an off the cuff discussion for 3 hours. So if you find a few opinions in here where you're like, I don't know, these guys, like, send us an email.
Feedback.
More than
Love
happy to
feedback.
clarify or change your minds or see something from a different perspective.
or if we said a name that you weren't sure who the person was, ask us and we can
We can send you the show notes on
on
this one. We got lots. So.
There's a lot of names that we brought up. So,
Or even just topics for future discussion. If you want clarification on ideas or us to dig into,
drill down into something specifically.
yeah, if you want
right.
Mike to go into like,
If you guys
audio
like
essays
Mike,
and stuff.
let us know. We'll bring him back.
No, I mean, like Mike's, if you go listen to One Christian Things, it's like a very good deep dive, well-researched deep dive into some of these things. So
I appreciate that.
but yeah, also keep it up with your podcast. So
Thank you.
All right.
I'm
Well,
very excited about it.
this has been the three amigos talking about culture.
And Tim, three amigos.
Three
and Tim.
amigos plus Tim. He's the
That's some
enchilada at the
cultural
end there.
appropriation. Right
A
here.
little bit maybe.
We started and ended with a cultural appropriation.
Yeah. And we'll be back next time, folks. So keep having real conversations. Catch you
Good
next.
stuff. Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Real Talk. If you'd like to send us some feedback, you can email us at reformedrealtalk@gmail.com. If you want to find us online, go to realtalkpodcast.ca. If you're looking for us on social media like Facebook or Instagram, or if you want to find us in your favorite podcast app, just search Reformed Real Talk and we should come up. We look forward to your feedback, as that is what helps us grow and improve as podcasters, podcast hosts. This show, Real Talk, is produced by myself, Lucas Holtfluer, and Tyler Vanderwood. Photo and video credits go to Tim Van Woudenberg from Timeless Photography. Theme music was produced by Calvin Hutt. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed and that you were informed and inspired. And please keep having real conversations. Till next time, bye-bye.